Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Rak Icc Registry Webinar. Delighted to have you joining us, and we're just waiting a moment for people to join before we get started. So we see the participant count increasing, and once that settles down, we'll get underway. So thank you very much for your attendance this morning. Good morning again, everybody, and welcome to the Registry Rak Icc webinar. We're just seeing the numbers increasing, so we'll wait a short while later, but I promise we won't keep you waiting long. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Welcome. Very pleased to have everybody participating this morning in the Rak Icc Registry webinar. You'll see from your screen that you were joined today by Lara, who you well know as our BD director, and of course, Dr. Samir Ansari, our CEO. And if you don't mind, Dr. Samir, I'll just hand over to you for a few moments of introduction. Thank you.
Sure. Good morning, everybody, and sorry to keep you waiting. A little bit of a technical issue on my side. My screen says Lara Malab twice. I think you know which one of us is Lara. Very welcome. It feels like it's been a long time since we've done one of these, and so we felt we were well overdue. Another one. There's a lot to catch up on, a lot to brief you on. It also feels like every time we have one of these, the world is facing all sorts of issues and challenges. And I'm glad to say that, as always, the UAE seems to be in a great position and continues to be in a great position. For us as a registry, 2021 was a very, very good year. Actually, we saw tremendous growth, tremendous interest in Rak Icc. Growth in the number of new registered agents, growth in the number of new incorporations. I can tell you our new incorporations grew by 40% or a little bit over 40% in 2021 compared to 2020. And so we go from strength to strength, but obviously we are not carried away by that success, because we are also very aware of all the challenges that the world faces. And of course, the UAE is no exception. But we also feel very confident that we can continue to ride through those challenges, and working as a team, all of us at ICC with you as our registered agents, we can overcome those, we can find solutions. And the other thing I can share with you, but I can't give too much details, is that we continue to look at ways to grow Rak Icc, to grow our breadths of services and products and solutions. And over the next few months, you will hear a lot more from us on some of those solutions. But I think I would conclude by saying that whenever there are challenges, there are opportunities. And you know, we've done it in the past. We've faced challenges in the past. We've come out as winners, and I believe we, the UAE, you will come out as winners out of these challenges. So let's continue to work together. We're always very open for ideas, suggestions. Even if you think something is crazy, don't hesitate to just throw it at us, and maybe we'll find something very interesting together. So with that, I will hand back to Alan, and I'll remain for any questions later on.
Thank you, Dr. Samir. Much appreciated. I'm just going to put on the screen now our the content of the webinar this morning. And we are talking about new initiatives. We're talking about what we're doing for the future. And then nonetheless, we're covering some reminders and updates, and things you will have been familiar with, things you'll have heard from us before, but nonetheless, we feel need reminding. We're talking about the wider environment, and we're all aware of the FATF and the implications that has on the UAE. We're discussing the steps we're taking on that. And then banking, we know, is a familiar topic for how we can make those, continue to make improvements in banking relationships. We are talking new initiatives. We're talking about how we're going to develop Rak Icc further. So that's the program that we're going to run through with you today. We will collect questions up. We'll answer as many as we can on the webinar today, but also, of course, we'll follow up with you if there are any questions raised that we don't get a chance to answer this morning. So digitization, we've been working very hard, and we've spoken to you about this in the past, that we're keen to make sure we're using the latest technology and we're using it wisely and we're using it safely. One of the measures we introduced last year to help with that was the accepting of ID documents through mobile phones. We haven't, I'll be perfectly honest, we haven't had the take up on that service that we might have expected. And we put that down to unfamiliarity with it, because people have been used to taking photocopies, stamping, attaching documents. But as part of our drive to modernize, we're seeing the opportunity to do things more digitally, more electronically. And if you want any more information on how that works and how that could improve the onboarding process for you as a registered agent, then please don't hesitate to contact us and we'll share details of that service. The service we're offering, but also if you have your own digital verification services that you want to use, we'll be more than happy to validate those. And digital certificates. We know how frustrating it is for you to have to wait for their certificate to be delivered. And so we are, by the end of Ramadan, introducing digital certificates so that as soon as you subscribe to a service, as soon as you incorporate a company, or as soon as you renew a company, the certificate will automatically be available for you to download through your portal. Once you've got that digital certificate, of course, you're able then to share it directly with your clients, directly with the bank, directly with counterparties, whoever might want to see it. And the next few slides will show you the process of how somebody that receives a digital certificate from you can then validate it and make sure that the information they're seeing on their screen is the same as the records that we have. We're always trying to simplify processes for you. We're always trying to make it easier for you to do business with us. We want to be your registry of choice, and we feel we'll be your registry of choice all the more if we can provide you with straightforward services. And we know that one of the frustrations for you has been having to obtain notarization on corporate resolutions. So if you're providing us with a corporate resolution, we're now saying that we will accept your attestation, we'll accept your confirmation that the document is genuine, and that will enable us to process your requests much more quickly. Of course, if you as the registered agent would prefer the document to be notarized, then that's very much your choice. We're not going to refuse the notarization. I'm just pleased to say that we're no longer going to be insisting on it, and we do hope that you'll find that a big improvement and enable you to conduct business with us much more straightforwardly. In terms of the certificate, I appreciate there's a lot to take on board on this screen, a very busy screen, and you're not necessarily going to be able to see all of the detail, but this is just a sample. But what I want to draw your attention to is the bottom of the page where you can see there's a link. And by clicking on that link on the digital certificate, you'll be taken to, or your client will be taken to the verification site. And then by entering some details, which I'll show you on the next slide, they will be able to confirm that what they're seeing does indeed match our records. We've kept the verification as simple as we can, but also wanted to make sure there are enough security measures in place so that you can be confident that not anybody can get into the data that we're holding. So we want to know who's asking for it. We want their email address. We will make sure they're checking the right company with the right document number and that they are a natural person. It's not a robot inquiring. And then very importantly, to the email address, we will send an OTP. Again, we feel this gives us more comfort, more assurance that the person that we're dealing with, we know who they are, and they have you know, an entitlement to the information because they're verifying a document that you've provided to them. And then the final step of the verification process is that they will see the document that we have on our records, and they'll be able to check that it's exactly the same. And all this will be able to be done immediately on the completion of the service request. We're starting with the documents of certificates, so the incorporation, the incumbency, certificate of good standing, and then over time we're planning to extend it out also to the registers, so that you will have an instant service on director changes, secretary changes, shareholder changes. Again, really striving this year to improve our services and make them more efficient for you. So that's it on digitization. The next topic I wanted to talk to you about was economic substance. And there's nothing new here. There's nothing you haven't heard before from us on ESR. But I did want to make the point that ESR does carry on. It is continuing. It isn't something that we did a couple of years ago and we don't have to worry about anymore. We have had people asking whether the tax changes will impact on ESR. And whether ESR might not be needed in the future once the UAE is under the corporate tax regime. And the simple answer on that is it's far too early to say. We haven't seen the tax law yet. We don't know who it will apply to. We don't believe it will apply to Rak Icc companies. But if that is the case, then it's all the more reason for the ESR requirements to actually carry on and continue. So please don't think that ESR is something that is going away anytime soon. I'm sure it will change, but we still need you to check every year, every company, and whether they have ESR. To help with that, the ministry have put a very good training system on their portal. And it's the first thing when you go to ESR guidance from the ministry, the first thing that comes up is their training materials. And I would encourage you to ask all of your relevant teams to undertake the training. There is a test at the end of the training. It isn't easy to pass, but it will prove that this is a complex situation that people need to understand. And the training is there designed to help people understand that. You'll be familiar from the renewal forms of companies that we're asking you to confirm on renewal whether the appropriate assessment for ESR has been made or will be made. And we are under an obligation to notify the ministry of any companies that don't confirm that to us. So it's really important that you don't just tick the box to get through the process on the economic substance section of the renewal form, but actually have considered whether the company does have ESR or not, because the ministry is under an obligation to fine companies that don't. And it's very difficult once that penalty has been levied to necessarily provide the evidence that would, you know, lead to a refund on it. So much better to do the ESR work up front, be up to date with your filings, be accurate with your filings, and avoid a penalty. And so we put a reminder of the dates there that are coming up. Obviously, companies that were renewed up to the 30th of September 2021 are now due to file their ESR notifications. And then companies that renewed up to the 31st of March 2021 are now required to file their reports for that period. And missing those deadlines will lead to a penalty. So please do everything you can to keep on top of that ESR work. People look at ESR and say, well, how can a Rak Icc company meet ESR? There's, what substance is there in the UAE on a Rak Icc offshore company? And of course, there is substance here. There's you as the registered agent providing the services that you provide. And for most Rak Icc companies that fall under ESR because they're holding companies, you're able to meet those ESR requirements through your outsourcing. Where there are companies that are even more, require even more substance because they're doing those other non-holding companies activities, and they require employees, they require premises. Of course, those options are available through premium product and through global product, and Lara will explain those products to you later. And then also the company could establish a branch on the mainland, or establish a branch in the free zone, which would enable it to meet ESR. So ESR is not an unsurmountable issue for Rak Icc companies, and we're happy to work with you in partnership on the right solution for your companies. Another federal initiative that is impacting on Rak Icc companies is CRS and FATCA. And what we've seen recently is a number of inquiries from the ministry where they've been made aware, predominantly by the US authorities, that there's a Rak Icc entity that's declared itself to be falling under FATCA. So I want to assure you this is not anything that we've initiated. We've not shared information with the authorities on these companies. What I'm thinking has happened is that the companies themselves, in their ordinary course of business, and when they've been applying for bank accounts, for example, have ticked the box to confirm that they fall under FATCA. So what the ministry is now doing is coming to us and saying, can you put us in contact with these companies because we want to clarify the situation. And so you can expect the Ministry of Finance to contact you to ask you about these companies, to find out whether or not there are filings that are due. And we've put on these slides that will be available to you later the links to get more information on FATCA and on CRS if you feel that you have companies that are falling under that. Very few Rak Icc companies will be involved because these are relating to financial services companies. And of course, Rak Icc isn't a financial free zone, so we don't generally have financial services companies. But nonetheless, obviously, there are some companies that do find themselves falling into scope. We're expecting more information from the ministry on this as the initiative develops. And of course, as soon as we have that information, we would pass it on to you. Another federal initiative was the requirement for all nominees to be declared. And you'll have seen that the ministry issued a white paper on nominee structures. They wanted to highlight the risks that they feel nominee structures can pose to corporate service providers. We've shared that working paper with you in the past, but obviously we'll put a link on there for you to be able to refresh your memories on that. We know that nominee arrangements are getting more attention, both from the ministry and indeed wider, and I'll talk about that on the FATCA later. And we know that there will be significant penalties for failing to keep the nominee agreement information up to date at Rak Icc. And then similarly, of course, there will be penalties for not keeping the UBO information properly disclosed and up to date. So just wanted to take the opportunity to remind you of those things. Again, making the point that we would much rather avoid instances where penalties are having to be levied. And then if there's anything we can do to help clarify the requirements to you, please don't hesitate to get in touch. Something else that's been new is the agent regulatory inspection regime. And you've seen these slides before. The approach we're taking hasn't changed. Obviously, it develops over time. But the requirement for Rak Icc to review the operation of the agents to make sure that you're meeting the standards we require is something that is going to continue. you're well aware that Rak Icc isn't your regulatory authority, and your own regulatory authority where you're registered obviously needs to do this work as well. But we are doing this to help our agents be compliant for the work that they're doing with Rak Icc. And I can't emphasize strongly enough the requirement for corporate service providers to be registered with GoAML, to have the appropriate compliance officers in place, to have the appropriate policies in place. And quite often, agents are doing what's required, but the record keeping might not be being kept up to date. So please make sure you get the credit for the work that you are doing by keeping the appropriate records, particularly of training that you have undertaken. Obviously, we're reviewing the client due diligence that you will be undertaking as a sample, because that gives us comfort again that you're meeting those requirements. And you already are fully aware of what we need in terms of making sure we do have the right beneficial owner information, that the proper risk assessment of that beneficial owner has been taken, and that it isn't just a thing that's done on onboarding, but that there's a regular review of relationships. And of course, not least of all, I'm sure you're all reviewing your client databases with what's going on at the moment. So you're aware that this is not a one-off activity. And of course, I would also mention on suspicious transaction reporting and the obligation of a DNFPB to make suspicious transaction reports. And I just want to make the point that that doesn't only relate to business you've done, it can also relate to business inquiries that you've had. And you may have received an inquiry, you may not have liked the look of the business, you may have turned the business down, and you would still be expected to report on that, even though no business was actually taken. So the process at the moment is still virtual. Of course, there's an expectation from the ministry that we will move towards doing in-person inspections once that becomes more practical again. But at the moment, it's a desktop exercise. We're sending you a return. We're asking you to send the information back to us. We follow up with some queries. We'll follow up with a report on what we feel you might be able to do to improve the practices. And if you haven't had that from us yet, but would be keen to understand what the process is, we're happy to share that with you, because it's much better for us if you can be ahead of the game, well prepared, so that when we do require the information, you already have the requirements met. That's better, obviously, for us all. So that's what I wanted to say on agent inspections. And why are we doing it? Well, obviously, part of it, the reason we're doing it, not least of all, because we want to mitigate the risk for us all in terms of the clients that we're doing business with. But of course, it is a FATF requirement. And you're aware of the FATF listing. We are aware that the UAE is now under increased monitoring. And I want to make the point that it's not just about the UAE as a federal authority, proving that we can move away from that increased monitoring. We all have a role to play in it. And one of the descriptions that I saw that resonated with me recently was that corporate service providers were described as the gatekeepers of AML CFT in the UAE. And so if we can prove that the corporate service provider regime is efficient and effective, then we can prove that the UAE is efficient and effective. So it's not about Rak Icc getting us off the increased monitoring. It's not about the federal authorities doing it. It needs to be a combined effort from all businesses in the UAE that might be have a role to play in mitigating, minimizing AML CFT deficiencies. Again, please keep in touch with us if there's anything you're not sure about in terms of what your obligations as a DNFPB are, then please speak to us, because the sooner we get that position resolved, the better for everybody. And of course, one of the things that has been picked up by FATF is that because this is a new regime, we've not been necessarily able to demonstrate full effectiveness. And part of that comes down to the imposition of penalties and sanctions on companies that may not have met the standards. And of course, we want to work with you to avoid the need for those penalties to be imposed again, because obviously, you know, that's not in anybody's interest to be penalized for that. That was the update from me in terms of what's happening with the registry. And I'm more than happy now to hand over to Lara, who will talk about what we've been doing with the banks to develop relationships further on the banking topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you, Dr. Samir, for the introduction. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Banking, we do understand that this remains the #1 challenge for most of the Rak Icc companies. Rest assured that we continue to work or develop relationships with key banks, whether in the UAE, international, private or digital banks. And we keep updating our banking guide, which I'm sure many of you must have received it. That includes all the requirements for the banks and the right contact details from the relationship manager of each of the banks. We've also developed a application process with Rak Bank, where you have a special point of contact from Rak Icc. You send some of the initial information about the company, and we send it to Rak Bank, which themselves, they will contact you directly. We've also had a successful collaboration with one of the digital banks that is based in the UK, and we've developed a process whereby the application is done through the Rak Icc portal. It has been very smooth. We've received lots of positive feedback. It's a quick and easy application process. You can do it for new incorporations and for an existing Rak Icc company. And the good news that I'm happy to share with you as well is that Interpolitan Money also, they are happy to accept an application for a company that is inactive. So in case you have any client who did not renew the company because they did not manage to open a bank account previously, so please send us the inquiry. The Interpolitan Money will be happy to review the application. If they're comfortable with the client, then we will tell you go ahead and renew the company and proceed with the account opening. Frankly, we've seen lots of developments in the or lots of demand for digital banks, especially as we move towards digitalization, and you know, the fintech and EMIs, that they are all disruptive to the traditional banking system, I believe. So so we've seen this rise in digital banking because it's fast and easy and provides a good solution for the clients. And therefore, we are also exploring another options, another digital banking solutions, similar to that what we have implemented with Interpolitan Money. And we are going to announce our collaboration with another digital bank probably by the end of this month. Again, very good news that I want to share with you is that because every time I have a meeting and I talk about foundations, the first question will ask me, like, what about banking for foundations, especially for local banks? While previously we discussed this with the local banks, and they weren't very comfortable with, or they are not familiar, I would say, with foundations. Now we've come to know, and we're happy to inform you that local banks are now accepting Rak Icc to open accounts for Rak Icc foundations. All right, this is for banking. The next slide, please. So what's new at Rak Icc? I'm sure many of you should have received the announcement email that we had this collaboration with Rak Icc. So this is another collaboration that we had Previously, we had a premium product, and now we've introduced the global product. Global product is a free zone company. Actually, we call it mid-shore because it combines the free zone features, and it has some of the requirements of the offshore, in the sense that it needs a registered agent to be able to assist the client with the incorporation and renewal and ongoing administration of the company. So it's a very good option for you as registered agents, because it gives this you the option or to manage the relationship with the client without just assisting them as a first step, and moving forward the client can deal directly with the free zone. This is not the case. So the client would need your assistance for the registration, as mentioned, and ongoing administration of the company. It has lots of activity types. Basically, it has a variety of license types, and including lots of activities. We've highlighted them here. And again, different packages depending on the client's requirements. We have different facility types and options for different visa packages. Again, I'm not going to mention the features because it's all the free zone features. It provides substance, as Alan mentioned earlier. It is again a solution for ESR, and it allows also migration from other jurisdictions through the global product. In case you require any additional information about global product, please reach out to us. We're happy to do training sessions and to provide you with more information about it. Again, I've also, you must have received this email, including the IT flyer that we've shared with you earlier. Just not to confuse you, this is not a new product. This is mainly just to highlight the activities that are available at Rak Icc, especially related to the IT. And since the information technology is a booming industry, and we've seen lots of, I would say, support from the government for the IT, artificial intelligence, fintech, blockchain, innovation, and so on. We wanted to remind you that there are lots of activities related to IT that are available at Rak Icc, and you can benefit from it through registering either the international business company, which is the Rak Icc company, or through the global product, depending on your client's needs. In relation to foundations, I'm sure many of you now are aware of the benefits of the foundations. I'm not going to highlight it again, but just a quick one. It's a very successful tool for succession planning, estate planning, for guaranteeing business continuity, especially that almost 70% of the wealth in this region comes from family businesses. So this is, there is a need, or it's essential to have a proper succession planning for these businesses to guarantee business continuity, and a tool that has a perpetual concept that survives from one generation to another. And of course, it provides the proper governance for these businesses. So in this slide, I just wanted to provide you some insights from the registry, the variety of usages, or who's using the foundations in terms of the founder's nationality. So we have over 42 nationalities using the Rak Icc foundations. A majority are from the UK, but you can see from India, from Austria, Italy, lots of European countries. And also the advantages that it is also used by Muslims. So unlike, for example, DFC Wills, which is specifically for non-Muslims, foundations is also acceptable for Muslims. And you can also use implement the Sharia laws in the foundation if it's required. And you know, this is just to see the popularity of the foundations. You can see that it was introduced in 2007 by DGM, followed by DIFC. And the numbers for the last couple of years picked up really fast. We've only introduced it in early 2020, and we've achieved a milestone of 100 last year. And we continue to receive lots of inquiries and demand for the Rak ICC foundations. And the last slide, I just want to provide you or give you a use case for a segregated portfolio company. Just to remind you of a segregated portfolio, what is a segregated portfolio company? It's a type of companies available at Rak ICC, whereby the general shareholder can set up this SPC and create portfolios underneath it, up to 10 portfolios. And the benefits of these portfolios is that each portfolio has a separate legal liability. It can hold different assets, and it can have different shareholders as well. In this case, we had a client whereby they wanted to have one of the portfolios to hold real estate in Dubai. And since we have this MOU with Dubai Land Department, allowing Rak ICC companies to hold real estate in Dubai, the client approached them. Now, since it's a new type of companies, we had lots of discussions and clarifications from the land department, provided them with all the information and the required documents for them to proceed with the registration, and it was successful. So the title deed was issued under the name of the portfolio underneath this SPC. So in case you require any further information about the segregated portfolio companies and the usages, please feel free to reach out to us. And I think that's it from my side.
Thank you, Lara. Appreciate that. I'm happy now just to have a look at what's in the chat and what questions we've been asked, and we'll run through how we can answer those. So the first question in the chat is about the digital documents, and we're being asked whether anybody can do the verification. And yes, to be able to verify the document, you'll have to have been given the document. So it's who you or your clients give the document to, whether it's the bank, the lawyer. It doesn't have to be the bank, the lawyer. It could be a business partner. It could be somebody that's interested in, in doing a deal with a company and then just wants to make sure that they're genuine. So anybody that you provide the information to will be able to validate it. It's not obviously generally available to people. It's purely a validation of the information that you've provided. We've asked whether you can get a copy of the presentation. Absolutely, it's going to be made available on the website. We'll be sending links. You'll be able to look at the slides. You'll be able to pass the video recording on to people. Question here, what about Rak ICC companies account opening locally? And Lara, as I say, has talked about that. If you've got any particular questions about bank accounts, speak to your relationship manager, because we've got the banking guide, and then we can try and put you in contact with the right person that will be able to help with that. And yes, contact your relationship manager about which banks are opening for foundations, and we'll put you in contact with the right person. And yes, the relationship manager bank contacts is on the banking guide. So anybody wanting an updated, we send it out on a regular basis, but if you want the updated banking guide, then please don't hesitate to request it. See the comment there from somebody that has sent an application to the bank and then didn't receive a response. Well, this is why we're happy to be involved in terms of liaising with the relationship managers if that is going to be any help to you. Question about whether migration can be done from other UAE free zones onshore and offshore. The answer is absolutely yes. Rak ICC can accept companies in from any zone or any jurisdiction internationally, provided their rules permit it. So it's very much depends on the individual zone as to whether a company can migrate or not. We are aware that the UK has gone out for consultation recently on whether they're going to start accepting redomiciliation of companies. That will be a big opportunity for the UAE if there are people with UK companies that would want to relocate them. Please advise if ESR notifications need to be filed for companies that do not. It says meet the substance requirements. I think the question probably should be does not have economic substance requirements. Obviously, the answer to that now is no. And I understand why there's some confusion, because originally we needed everybody to file. Now you just need to confirm to us on renewal whether or not you've done the filings if you needed to. And no, a company that does not have economic substance requirements does not need to file. If the company has economic substance requirements, it has to file whether it's met them or not. There will obviously be penalties for not meeting those substance requirements. So please refer to that training material that's available on the site because that will be useful. There won't be any charges in changing in pricing for the electronically issued documents. We see it very much as an improvement of service that we want to provide to you, and we expect you'll see great benefit from that. So part of our cooperation and collaboration with you. No, there's no update on corporate tax at the moment. We will be waiting, like everybody, for the law to be published. And then when the law is published, it wouldn't surprise me at all if we ran a webinar on it in terms of how it might apply to Rak Icc companies. But I will just caveat that by saying that it won't be Rak Icc's role to provide tax advice. That's not an area that we would be able to comment on. But we will be keen to put you in contact with the people that can provide that advice. And I'm sure the accountants on the call today will be looking forward to being able to advise on that as and when the time is right. But at the moment, we just have to wait for the legislation to be published. And then I'm sure there'll be an awful lot of commentary around it in terms of who's affected or who might be affected and who might not. There's a question concerning foundations. And yes, the Rak Icc would allow a DIFC foundation to be a shareholder of a Rak Icc company. And I believe Rak has the same. I don't see any reason why an entity that is established in the UAE wouldn't be able to be a shareholder. Obviously, there's slightly different documentation that's required when a foundation is the shareholder. But yes, we will accept foundations as shareholders on Rak Icc companies. In actual fact, we'd actively encourage it. We do see it as part of the Rak Icc companies definitely have a role to play in a foundation structure. Yes, we've had migrations from other free zones, and absolutely we've had migrations from offshore jurisdictions. No restrictions on that at all. There'll be the recording. Sorry, we had a question about how we might be able to split the recording out from the presentation. You're going to be able to see both. You're going to be able to see the recording, or you're going to be able to see the presentation slides. That's fine.
Yeah, we will be sharing with you the recordings and the slides separately.
And then there's a comment in terms of bank accounts and the minimum investment that's required. That changes bank to bank and activity to activity and client to client. So again, there's no direct necessary, it's not automatic that a certain balance would be needed. And again, we're happy to work through with you on the relationships on those. Just switching over, that was everything that was in the chat. Just switching over now to the Q&As. there's a question about whether you need to change the relevant activity if it's no longer falling under ESR. And what I would say on that is that it's important to change the activity of a company to keep the information up to date and relevant. But the activity on the memorandum is only one of the aspects that's considered for ESR because the substance over form approach is adopted. Now, I don't know who's asking that question, but if you want to contact me directly, I'll be more than happy to go through that in more detail. CRS, a question as to whether or not a particular investment company falls under CSR. It's not something we would be able to advise on. The CRS rules really relate to this specific activity of the company that's in more detail than Rak Icc would be aware of. But that is why we're putting you to that guidance, and I hope you can find the answer on the guidance we're sharing. In terms of apostilling for the nominee director shareholders, we're happy to take your attestation. If you feel more comfortable with getting the documents apostilled, then you certainly may, but we're not requiring that any longer. No, a company with no bank accounts or investments would need to file CRS, but again, we're not CRS advisors, and important that you have a look at the guidance to work on that. And similarly, yeah, in terms of the Ministry of Finance, it is dealing directly with the ministry on that. So they have a portal to take the FATCA filings. And yes, you would need to look at the ministry site because there's advice on there on how to file. And then we've got a question on, do we have any companies or partners that would assist on AML compliance? And absolutely we do. We've got, if anybody wants to know the companies that provide those support services, then contact us and we will put you in contact with somebody that we feel might be able to help your particular need. I think that's the Q&A's dealt with. I don't know, Lara, if there's any other comments, and Dr. Smith, if you've got anything else to add.
No, not really. I think we've covered everything. Thank you, Alan, and thank you, Lara. That was quite comprehensive. The only thing I would add is that clearly we are living in uncertain times, and there is a lot going on, and I can understand why people might be a little bit confused with everything that's going on. There is uncertainty. You know, the fact that we've been put on the grey list, the tax regulations, and waiting for the final regulations so that we're all clear as to what's required from onshore companies, free zone companies, offshore companies, etc. You know, the war in the Ukraine and the wider implications and the impact on sanctions, etc., which is being updated on a daily basis. Of course, all of that creates a lot of uncertainty, but I think, again, we're lucky to be in what is one of the few safe havens in the world, and that is going to create a lot of opportunities, because with all that uncertainty, people are going to go to these safe havens, and the UAE is one of those, and we're here to support you, and you know, with all this uncertainty, I'm sure you have a lot of questions. We're here to try and address those with you and for you and find solutions. So talk to us.
Okay, great. Thank you. We'll end the webinar there, but please don't hesitate to get in contact with any of us if you've got any questions that arise from today's topic. And indeed, if there's anything else you'd like us to cover in future sessions, please let us know. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.